Well, we want to look at today this question: what is the Raqia of Genesis 1 6 through 8? And if we just look at the text here in Genesis 1 6, just pull up the text now. Two verses. Elohim said, "Let there be a Raqia in the midst of the waters." And you can see that the Septuagint translates this stereoma of firmness, same word used in the New Testament of the firmness of your faith. So Elohim said, "Let there be a Raqia in the midst of the waters, and let it be a thing constantly dividing." And you can see the parsing below. It's a Hiphil participle. So the idea is that this is something constantly dividing the upper waters from the lower waters. And then it says Elohim made the Raqia, and he caused a division, or it caused a division. I probably favor the he caused, going back to Raqia, between the waters which were from underneath to the Raqia, and between the waters which were from upon to the Raqia. That's a literal translation. And it was so. And you may see right here, there's a textual variant, and it points out that in the Septuagint we have the added phrase, "and God saw that it was good." Every other of the first 6 days has that, but while the Greek passage has that, the Hebrew manuscripts don't. God doesn't call day 2 good, specifically good. The whole creation's good, but he passes over that in silence, and so that's confused many interpreters. We have this thing, the Raqia. Raqah, in terms of a root, implies violence. It's used of stomping your enemy in the dust. It's used of hammering the rebel priest, smashing their censers and flattening them on the side of the altar. So there's a question: what does this mean? And so that's what I just wanted to look at a little today. We asked the question: how does the Raqia fit together in a whole Bible biblical theology? What are the other examples in the scripture of salvific space between waters? So where else do you see deadly waters and then there being some kind of salvific space in the middle? And then how is the Raqia related or not related to the temple veil? And so just in a few minutes in this video, wanted to see what we could say about that and see where it takes us. Now, this is my literal translation. Then God said, "Let there be a Raqia." I'm just transliterating the Hebrew word, "in the midst of the waters, and let it be a thing constantly separating." I think that's what's being implied by the Hiphil participle there, that somehow this Raqia is touching both the upper waters and the lower waters. God made the Raqia, separated the waters from the below the Raqia and the waters which were above the Raqia. And it was so. So God called the Raqia heavens, and there was evening and there was morning a second day. That's odd. In Hebrew, it's, well, don't take my word for it. We can look at the text. A day not the second, but a second day, and that's very odd in that the sixth day is called the sixth day, so something going on there, I would think. The interesting thing about the things separating is that just happens to be the same word that's used in the description of the temple in the Hifil, causing a separation, and you can see that there it's the veil. So it raises the question, is the Raqia, if Genesis 1 is describing, this heavenly temple, is the Raqia perhaps functioning as the veil separating the holy place from the Holy of Holies? I would just ask this question. Do you think God made his word for ordinary people? Is it designed for the person in the pew, or is the Bible somehow only the province of scholars? I would think that the historic position would be that God made his word for ordinary people. And, I might follow that up. Do you think ever that he benefits the church by raising up pastors who can sometimes help us, put the pieces together? I would certainly affirm that. But if God made his word for ordinary people, I would just ask the question, or make this statement, use the Bible to interpret the Bible. And if that's so, and you are part of that first group of people hearing Genesis read for the first time, and you hear about the violent splitting of waters, and then even you see in the next day Yabashah appearing, dry land. Is there another story, perhaps, where you have the violent splitting of waters and then dry land appearing? Is there any other story like that? And I would say there is. It would be the crossing of the Red Sea. God violently splits the water and Yabashah appears. Many of the words here in this first text are used in the crossing of the Red Sea. Pretty standard Jewish interpretation, and even in the scholarly world, many will see crossing of the Red Sea as a mini version of creation. If that's true, then, and I'm unsure exactly where I got this picture from. I feel certain I got it off the internet, but it's Moses functioning as the image of God, and he's using this mateh, this staff, and he violently creates salvific space. I would think that would be how most of the first audience, Moses' first audience, would have taken that the Raqia is whatever is holding these waters apart. And we might quote a recent scholar who said eventually the Jews asked not what's holding the waters apart, but who. That seems to me would be the normal reading of this. The Raqia is somehow this thing constantly holding back these deadly waters. And if we take that view, what are these waters? Well, you can see what they're called in the Greek Bible. They're called the abyss. It's this word, tehom, in the Hebrew. And What we know about the abyss, just in terms of a whole biblical theology, is that demons are terrified of the abyss. They beg Jesus not to throw them in the abyss. At the end of Revelation, the word abyss is translated bottomless pit. And so you have these abysmal waters at creation are violently split in two by this Raqia, and what comes about is salvific space. We see here the text in Luke 8:31, and here you can see this is the exact same word that's being translated here, bottomless pit. So what is the Raqia? Well, the Raqia makes salvific space. Well, what are the other examples of salvific space in the midst of deadly waters? Where in the biblical narrative do you see those deadly waters being split and salvific space made? Well, of course, all the New Testament examples were tied up with Jesus, but in the Old Testament, the Noah's flood, salvific space is in the ark. The miracle is repeated, Joshua at the Jordan. The presence of God is creating salvific space in the midst of waters. They're crossing over on dry land. These are two images from the internet. It's interesting that the waters are divided at Adam. You wonder if that's hearkening back to the original creation story. And then it says they were piled up at Zarethan. In Hebrew, that word means something like their distress. And so is there some kind of meta-narrative elegance there? The thing that's keeping people out of the land flowing with milk and honey, that God is doing something. We see Elijah kind of does a reverse conquest. He goes backward through all the cities, and then he divides the water at the Jordan. And in many of these stories, the same thing is happening. Of course, Abel Shittim, this is where Israel crossed when Moses died. You can see, and you may or may not know, that Abel Shittim means the field of thorns. The lawgiver can only get you to the field of thorns until he's followed by this really cool guy in the story named Asus. And Asus, Joshua, Jesus, can take people from the field of thorns and bring them into a land flowing with milk and honey. This is a picture of the ruins of the first century church commemorating where Jesus was baptized at the Jordan River. And if you ask where that is, well, that church is right there. You have a mimicking or retelling of God's people going into land flowing with milk and honey into restored Eden. Jesus in his baptism is 30 years old. When he starts, that's probably going back to the idea that priests started their ministry at 30 years old. We have a connection between God's work in Genesis 1 and ending in 2:3. We have a connection there between God finishing creation and Moses finishing the tabernacle. And if I could just put that up in Hebrew, you see you have Elohim completed, and then you have Moses completed. Well, you don't even have to be able to read Hebrew to tell those are exactly the same words. We have on the seventh day, this is the Genesis 2 text, and then we have the word his work. Well, here, when Moses makes the temple, he finishes the work. And, you know, you don't even have to be able to read Hebrew to recognize that those are the same words. We don't have the time element in the Exodus 40:33, but it seems like there's an echo there between God's creation of the world to be a tabernacle and Moses making the earthly copy of it using the same words. And if that's true, then the Raqia, you can make the case, is somehow the veil between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. And if that's the case, then, you know, you go to a place like Revelation 15, where you're going through the heavenly waters, and there's salvific space there, and you get safely to the other side, and you sing the Song of Moses. So all these stories are playing off each other. Well, there's a common suggestion that nearly everything I've just said probably isn't right, that rather the conception of the universe is presented in Logos Bible software, picture of kind of a concrete dome or something, I suppose, and then you've got your windows, you know, that the water comes through, the earth is floating on this giant deep, and then Sheol is somewhere down here. And, you know, the argument is made that this is a common Jewish conception. This drawing's in the Faith Life Study Bible, I believe, and in Logos Bible software. I don't think that's the right thing, and I would ask these questions. Is this separation of water connected linguistically to anything else in the Pentateuch? And clearly the answer to that question is yes. It's the crossing at the Red Sea or Reed Sea. We may be able to talk about that. What relationship, if any, exists between the Raqia of Ezekiel 1 and Ezekiel 10 with that of the description in Genesis 1? Because here the Raqia is described as being in heaven, and Ezekiel sees it in a vision, looks through it, and on the other side he sees God, or one like a son of man, language like that. If Genesis 1, as many are arguing, has a tabernacle temple background, how does the Raqia fit in with that? And may be able to make the argument that there is a veil. And then what relationship is there between the Raqia and its upper waters to the crystal sea mentioned in Revelation 4:6 and in 15? Well, look at the differences in translation. Whenever you come to text and you see even translations differing with themselves, and even with different translations within the Hebrew Bible, you know that there's probably some kind of issue there. I love that NCV says God created as something. That's probably the safest translation. If we turn to the ancient translations, it's very interesting that the Syriac in Ezekiel translates it as the tabernacle. God created the tabernacle. You can see the Septuagint is the firmness, or the stone of sapphire. That's an interesting. The Vulgate is just trying to translate the Septuagint, I think. And notice that the Targums don't try to interpret the word. They just include what it sounds like. God created a Raqia. The difficulties with the Raqia, and sorry, Keynote messed this up, but Raqia has to do with hammering or stomping in the verb form. God spreads out the Raqia in 42:5. He spreads out the earth above the waters in these passages. Stereoma in Greek is a result word from the word firm, so a resulting firmness. This passage in the Septuagint just baffles me. And again, sorry about the font kind of messing up when I went over to Keynote, but because the heaven, like smoke, was made firm. So that's really interesting. How can something be made firm like smoke? I wonder if the translator isn't talking about billowing out or something like that. And here, by the word of the Lord, the heavens were made firm. I think that's been cut off a little there, but and there are more difficulties. Qumran uses the term Raqia in the plural in these two documents. Qumran can even speak of the wings of the Ruach being what supports the Raqia, so it's like a flying Raqia. Other Jewish literature speaks of the spirits being dissolved into the Raqia, which I wonder if, like, the background of Revelation 15 doesn't have something to do with that. So the two major positions, it's part of an ancient cosmology that perhaps is more dramatic, and we don't necessarily have to believe it, or that the waters above equal the clouds. I don't find either of those arguments very convincing. We'll look at why in a little bit. When we look at the history of the idea, and this idea of the ancient cosmology, the oldest that I can find anyone who has a diagram like this is Nicholas of Lyra, in his Postilla, which is his commentary on the whole Bible. Nicholas of Lyra was the guy Luther goes to when he needed help in interpret. And it's interesting that this drawing isn't in Genesis 1. This drawing is the drawing in Ezekiel. And so we've got the Raqia, we've got the cherubs. This is somehow the mobile chariot of God. And so the stereoma would be this thing through which Ezekiel is looking, but clearly that's in a vision. He's not saying that's what the physical world looks like. He's saying that's what I saw in heaven. The Geneva Bible has almost that same drawing, but again in Ezekiel 1. It isn't until almost 1900 that we get this. One of these books is by an astronomer who wrote about stars and then said this drawing is the biblical view. I think Schiaparelli is the Italian astronomer, and you can see Robinson in 1913 has this picture. But my question is, would an ancient astronomer believe that? would an ancient astronomer believe that the heavens rested on the foundations in the earth, or rested on the mountains, as we have in White House's drawing? I think not. If you go to the night sky and look at the North Star, you get this. This is time lapse. It's clear that stars over time do this, and it's a fairly easy deduction to make that we're dealing with rotating circles. Would an ancient astronomer believe that the dome rested on a mountain? I think not. Remember, the culture of the Egyptians could plot the position of individual stars over time so that on the anniversary of Pharaoh's birthday, the stars will line up precisely. Anyone with that kind of level of the night sky knows that these stars aren't some kind of concrete dome. And Moses, it said, was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and they had built building pyramids for 1,000 years. So it seems unlikely to me that they had a view that viewed it as like a concrete dome. I would hope, and you do see this drawing, it's everywhere, all kinds of study Bibles have it today. I would hope that eventually people would acknowledge that this drawing, in fact, is just Robinson's drawing in 1913. It seems that all these things are exactly the same in this, even the position of the moon and the three stars. It's a great drawing, but probably you should credit that drawing, and I'm questioning even the validity of the drawing, that's what the people believed. If Moses wrote the Pentateuch and he knew the wisdom of the Egyptians clearly did not believe in a concrete dome. You have this idea of immersion and this final sea, and you compare that to this glassy sea and mixed with fire. I did not know this, but my friends in science say that water will burn if you put it under enough pressure. It's interesting that this is picturing burning, what looks like burning water, and when they get through on the other side, they sing the song of Moses. It seems to me, if Genesis 1 is connected with the Red Sea, clearly here the upper waters are being brought into that, and clearly this is not the clouds. This is some kind of supernatural thing. You have the glassy sea before God's throne with the four living creatures. That seems to be connected with this passage, and we are using the same words, and there are these cherubim creatures. You do have this stereoma of this sapphire stone connected with theophany of God, and of course this is a debated passage. All of these passages seem to use the tabernacle temple language of the Raqia and the heavenly holy of holies, and if it's connected here, then clearly we're not talking about some kind of this world reality. Dwayne Watson makes an interesting connection, and he shows the wider Jewish connection to this idea of the heavenly firmament. I found that very helpful. And Greg Beale has a wonderful discussion, page 413 in his Biblical Theology. Love this quote, just as Israel was led by Moses and had to go through the sea to Exodus into the promised land, and just as the second generation had to do the same thing at the Jordan River under Joshua's leadership as a miniature second Exodus, so again now Israel's restoration is imminent. Jesus, true Israelites again must identify with water. I found this helpful too. Augustine, seeing the firmament is kind of the veil between the corporeal world and the incorporeal world. That's from his commentary on Genesis. Similar thing in Theodoret of Kerr, I guess you say that, I don't know. But notice he's making the point of the veil and the firmament. Luther has an interesting thing as well, kind of trying to put this in the whole Bible, biblical theology. And even Reno's excellent commentary, I think, on Exodus. Reno writes, putting all these stories together. I think when you put all of that together, you get this idea of the Raqia is related to this, an otherworldly crossing of the Red Sea. And sorry this is cut off, but Sailhammer, I think this is from Pentateuch's narrative. He argues against the vault, but he argues for the clouds. I don't think that does justice to the whole Bible, biblical theology. Salvific space in the ark. Of course, Jesus, when he's baptized, a dove, one of the texts in Hebrew says the dove went into him. You have a dove going into the ark. You wonder if there's some kind of salvific space thing going on there. That's some of my ideas. I would be interested to hear some of yours. I wish you well in your journey to understand God's Word, and as we look at this strange text, the Raqia. All the best.